Pharaonic Egypt. We did some Egypt, Inca Peru, Aztec Mexico, Han China, Imperial Rome, ancient Greece, or other ancient societies of a certain scale and monumentality. So I'm going to call these, try and come up with a word for them. Big monument empires, places that were large and made big things. We're still looking at them and getting excited about them. The thing about these societies, and the next line of that quote, is that Wengrow says that these were deeply stratified. That is to say that there were huge class divisions between what we may call the poor and the rich. They were, most of them, governed by what we call authoritarian governments. These were not democracies. These were some people order people around and make people do things. Also, usually lots of violence and the radical subordination of women. You want to live in this society, Tyler? Huh? You'd pass. Yeah. This doesn't sound like the best society to live in unless you're on the top of it, right? You know, but if you just had to roll the dice and say, hey, which society would you rather live in? I'd probably pick our own, right? I mean, I'd rather be a random member of our own society than a random member of this society. So it does lead to the question, why do we celebrate these societies that made big monuments and yet were very unequal, very unfree, hurting each other, and being mean to the women? So this is what was happening in general, not all the time, but certainly in some of these places, most of them, you might say. Wengrow goes back and says, wait a second, though. What did the word civilization actually mean? Or where did it come from? What's the root of the word? Alexa.
Oh my gosh, I can't remember what I wrote, but I know like the first part of like the civilization has to do with like those that kind of were like strong and wise and like kind of like brought something to like the civilization, which is pretty much like nailed on. Yeah. Like the men thought that civilization was so strong because like they were part.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically going to tell us that men part comes a little bit later. That if you go back to the root of the word, it has this root word of being civil to each other, which has to do with political wisdom and things like mutual aid, being able to be nice to each other, being civil, cooperating, social cooperation, hospitality, being able to extend to people that maybe you don't even know across boundaries, being able to extend hospitality, or just caring for others, being able to care across different ethnic and social and class lines. And what he's arguing here is that, you know, that's the original meaning of civilization. And shouldn't this be what we still think of as civilization? Why are we celebrating all these big monuments and people playing classical music in the middle of nowhere when other people are hurting each other? We should really be concentrating on these kinds of things as our root word of what the root word and true meaning of civilization. Now, you might say, well, that's all fun, that's all nice, Wengrow, that civilization should mean that, but did it ever mean that? And Wengrow insists that in fact it did mean that, in certain places of the world, actually in many places. He gives us one example in this article. In his bigger book that I think I showed you before, that I thought about assigning to this class, they were a co-authored book. They give us different examples, including examples from the indigenous Americas in North America and what is now Mexico on the edges of the Aztec Empire, but not part of the Aztec Empire, and in Andean Peru. There are lots of different examples of people who got together and had political wisdom and mutual aid across large cultural areas. In this case, he's going to be specifically discussing a series of communities in what we refer to as the Fertile Crescent, which is a pretty large geographical area. I think you probably learned about this in school as the rivers of Tigris and Euphrates and the Mesopotamian, and the source of some of the large civilizations. But during this period, before there were these big cities that grew up in this area, they didn't have kings and they didn't have standing armies, but they did a lot of stuff here. Bowden, what kind of stuff did they do?
Well, they helped each other.
They helped each other. Yeah, there was this sort of large sphere of interaction. It's not that everything was perfect, but people would go back and forth, and there was kind of a large sphere of hospitality across the region and standards for what you do when somebody shows up. You know, you offer them something to drink and eat and those kinds of things. They were nice to each other. They also made some stuff, some cool stuff. Stuff that is still kind of with us today. You know, advances in math and calendars. We're talking about the Arabic numerals, you know, those kinds of, they didn't have then. This is one of the areas of the world that these things developed. Advances in metallurgy, being able to make different things, grow olives, have olive oil, vines, date palms, leavened bread. That's always a good thing to have. But perhaps most importantly, wheat beer, and being able to share that and have it be a standard of hospitality. This is one of the key areas in which it was made. So what Wengrow is saying is that in this area and in other areas, there are other areas where they made different kinds of beverages and different kinds of food items and shared them across a large area of the world, that people were able to transcend their kind of local ideas and to create these larger connections, which gave us a lot of stuff. Now, the question about this is, who is doing all this stuff? Who is at the core of these innovations? Who are the people giving us leavened bread, wheat beer, geometrical forms? Yes. Men and women, but actually, Bowden, sorry, mostly women. Mostly women, because women are at the core of almost every society. At least the anthropologists will tell us that in almost every society, women are the ones who handle the plant-based knowledge, the knowledge of plants and herbs and how to grow things and all those things. And so they were probably also at the center of initial weaving and textiles and the geometric designs. And we can also see that when it comes to pottery, that some of those earliest pottery designs look like the things that they might have been using when they were weaving. Now, again, you're right, Bowden, this is everybody. Everybody had to share and be nice to each other and prosper in this society. But in terms of some of the things that first came out, it seems to be that women were at the center of these innovations, in part because we know how much women are at the center of plant-based knowledge today. So that, of course, leads to the question of what happened. great quote from Cheyenne, although I had to change it to the little quote. What until now has passed for civilization might in fact be nothing more than a gendered appropriation by men etching their claims in stone of some earlier system of knowledge that had women at its center. What does this mean, Cheyenne? Why did you choose it?
Well, I think that I thought it was interesting how like men claim their spot.
Men claim their spot. A gendered appropriation. Claim is a nice word here. What's a better word? What's a shorter version of this sentence? Yes.
This is all like a fairy tale made up by men to like boost their own egos.
Oh.
Place in history.
Oh, fairy tale is also too nice. Let's use appropriation. Huh? Stealing. It's the title of the article, How Men Stole Civilizations. The idea is, I mean, and maybe it's a little over dramatic, but women have built up this system. They've made all this stuff, and men come in and etch their claims in stone. You're right, claims. They basically take this stuff and like make it into stone tablets and make everybody do what they want. So, how men stole this stuff and tried to claim it and make it into the fairy tale, the lie of their own creation. Now, this is, of course, about the past and about the possibilities of looking at the past in ancient times and looking at it and looking at for other possibilities and understanding different ways to interpret it. And like I said, this happened in the olden days, in ancient times, but also in many places throughout the world. And it also happens historically in different places. And Wengrow's point is in some ways to take it up to even in today, or at least when he was writing in 2018, which he called even in these darkest hours. And there were some dark times during that period, but people have muddled ahead. And he gives us examples of people from this region of the world in which they have been able to get together and practice hospitality and mutual aid across these societies. Now, for those of us who are looking at the news, the horrific news over the weekend, and looking at this area of the world and what has happened in what is now Israel and Gaza, or we hear headlines from Syria and Jordan and Iraq, this often is a place that produces some of the saddest headlines and some of the saddest news that we have, and truly horrifying things. But at the same time, as Wengrow would put it, that's the time that we most need to hold on to some of these older ideas of what it means to be civil to each other, to be civilized and be in civilization and provide hospitality and mutual aid. And despite what we see, we do see people being very terrible, but there are lots of ways in which people across this region and across our whole regions have come together and provided for each other and assisted each other. And we can hope that we can hang on to those ideas in the future.